Good morning, and it's a cold, wet one this morning. It's not raining at the moment, but it's definitely threatening it. So of course, I've come out without my umbrella because I'm an idiot. Anyway, I think I've fixed the issue with my microphone. It auto-connected this morning. I did a firmware update, and it was the most ridiculous, over-complex way of just connecting to... the only way you can do a firmware update apparently with this thing is by using the app on your device, so be it your tablet, your phone or whatever. I have it on my phone because with that you can, if I wanted to, I could actually upload my videos actually while I was out and about. I don't. I edit them on my computer first, but I could do that. I could actually upload while I was out through the app on my phone. In doing that, I also then, with that app, is how you update the firmware. Well, to get my mic to connect to my iPhone, I have to use this, what do they call, an RX receiver, which comes with a microphone. So I connect that to my phone. You can plug it into the little USB port on the phone. So I did that. And the software recognises the device. Hang on. So, as I was saying, so to edit that bit out, oh my lord, this is horrific. Must have been raining really bad overnight. Oh God. This is why I need my boots. I need proper footwear. Oh, this is not good. This is not good. Anyhow. So, as I was saying, even though the RX, which is the receiver, was plugged into the phone, and the software sees it, and it's all connected and shit, I'm sure that was Ian Asprey out of the Cult. Yeah, even though all of that, he says, oh, you can't update the firmware via the USB, you've got to use Bluetooth. What? That is the absolute opposite to how most devices work. They don't want a wireless signal for firmware updates because, well, it's not reliable. And the quickest way of bricking a device is to screw up a firmware update. So anyway, well, so I had to undo it, unplug it from the phone, connect via Bluetooth, so it updated the receiver. And then you have to update the microphone itself. And trying to get that to bloody connect to the receiver, to then connect to my phone, wasn't having it. So then I had to shut the bloody receiver off and directly connect the microphone to the phone via Bluetooth to do this stupid update. I thought, what the most convoluted crap. First of all, it should never be done over a wireless connection, ever. It should always be done via a hard connection, via the USB cable. So whoever did the software for the DJI phone, they need to sort that out, because that is absolute nonsense. Anyway, stop this here. and see you in the park. The subject, well, we're about done with video games, to be perfectly honest. About done on that front. So I thought I'd talk about something that I do have a love of, is sci-fi. I really enjoy that, and I thought, you know, I'd like to focus on one particular element of sci-fi. And for me, where it all kicked off as a little kid was in the movies, was obviously Star Wars. I absolutely love that film, but there was another piece of sci-fi that I loved, and it put the fear of God into me as a little kid at the same time, and that was War of the Worlds. Now, that story was originally penned by H.G. Wells. I think it was like 1898, but it was not the book, but rather the musical version that was done by Jeff Wayne, a composer. Now, it actually came via my sister. She had the album when I was a kid, and I loved it, but it was like scary at the same time, you know, for a little kid. You know, the idea of these aliens invading Earth and incinerating people with a heat ray, and then sort of capturing them. And in the book and in the on the album, they captured people and they drained them of their blood. They were using them as a source of nutrition. They kind of changed that up in the 2005 movie, where they were kind of using people's blood as a fertilizer for the red weed, which is still that's still horrific, but not quite as horrific as how it was in the book and in Jeff Wayne's musical version. And then the Martian siren that they sort of had on the album, the ooh-la, it was really loud, and that was kind of scary as well. You know, when you're a little kid, I think that came out in like 1978. So it was like around that time with Star Wars. So there was those two real big events for me as a kid that got me heavily into sci-fi. It was a great story going back to War of the Worlds, and I'll come to Star Wars, but I wanted to talk about War of the Worlds today. I have talked a little bit about Star Wars in the past, but I've never covered this one. And as I say, I suppose I can tenuously tie it into video games as well, because there have been some War of the Worlds video games, but to be perfectly honest, none have really been spectacularly good. They've been okay to awful to this really has nothing to do with War of the Worlds, you just kind of slap the name on it. But we'll come to that in good time. I loved the album. I used to borrow it off my sister and listen to it, and then I bought my own version of it. Back then that was on vinyl. I think I probably would have been about 5 or 6 years old when I got my version of it. And it was great. What was really cool about it was that they had an art book that came with it, and that art book was really, really good. They commissioned a few artists to do art for certain parts of the album, and which in turn was obviously based on the H.G. Wells novel. And it was striking, very memorable artwork, especially the tripods. They took a little bit of artistic license from H.G. Wells' description in the book. In the book, the tripods, were kind of described a bit like, how can you describe them really? I mean, the way he kind of describes them differently at different times in the book. And I think what happened was, initially the book was serialized in a periodical back then, which is like a magazine. And I think it was called Pearson's. And he was basically writing the story as a series. And the perception of the fighting machines when he describes them early on were these very rigid, stilted machines, sort of like quite inarticulate, and he wasn't happy with that. So I think later on in the story, he starts to describe them differently. He starts to describe them as more flexible, and I think that kind of made it difficult to judge what they look like. I believe a Brazilian artist, whose name I will probably butcher horrifically, Carrera or something, he did some artwork and Wells was like, yeah, that's kind of quite accurate. But when you looked at the artwork from that time period, they do look a bit weird. They've got like eyes with a pupil in. They kind of do look like their machines themselves are sort of not mechanical devices. Well, it's weird. They've got an eye with a pupil, which kind of makes them look a bit silly by today's standards. Not very alien. And they do look like they're boilers on stilts, which somebody describes them like that in the book. And it kind of does look like a big boiler with an eye stuck on it. I mean, they're pretty cool, but they're not very alien looking. It's kind of like if people were building a walking machine out of material that they had available to them. That's what it would be. So when you see the album artwork from the late 70s, now again, there was a few artists, but I think the guy who did the design for the fighting machines on the album artwork was, I think his name was Michael Trim. Now, I might have got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was the one that did it, and he actually did these. Years later, they released an anniversary album, which I got, and that has like loads of CDs, and it has more artwork inside of the album. It was this big, huge LP, sort of long play sized folder, really. It came in, but it was CDs, it wasn't vinyl. And in there, it had the concept drawings of the fighting machines. And, you know, he's measuring things out and sort of describing what each element is, how high it was, what the functions of it were, etc. But very alien. These things had two very bulbous, luminous green eyes to them. They look like bug eyes. And then this sort of very aluminium grey machinery. And it just looks very scary, very imposing, very terrifying, and very alien. Which is why to this day that and the Spielberg tripods are my favourite. And those two designs really sort of capture the essence of the fighting machines. So as a kid, you marry that to like scary material and it scared the hell out of me. But it thrilled me at the same time. It was exciting. And so yeah, I got quite into it. And then after that I saw the 1950s version, it was set in the 50s, made in the 50s, which was the George Pal produced, Byron Haskins directed version. Now these had their fighting machines kind of were more like hover devices. However, they were intended to be on three legs, and they were doing it via like a repulsor, anti-gravity repulsor devices that fired like electrostatic charges. Now, in a couple of scenes in the film, you can see underneath the machine there are three holes, and from them three holes emanates these like sparks that are pushing the fighting machines up off the ground, and they're supposed to be the legs. So technically they are tripods. It was just that they're using like a weird electrical field as legs rather than a mechanical device. However, the only reason you only see it in a couple of scenes in the film is because it wasn't an optical effect. They were really using electricity, and it was lighting the studio floor on fire. And you can actually see the floor starting to catch fire in certain scenes. So they dropped it, and so that's why people think that, oh yeah, they're not tripods, they're floating devices. Well, no, they are. It's just that for safety purposes they couldn't actually keep showing in every scene the tripod machine, them actually as tripods because of that danger. So it's fascinating. But that film was great. It was really scary. And even though it was set in a completely different country, it was set in the US rather than the UK, it was still very well done. It was great. I love that film. It's really good at it. I've got the 4K of it, and they've cleaned up a lot of things, because when it come out on DVD and they cleaned the image up and they changed the colour, they recolorized it, you could see the strings that were holding these machines up. Apparently these machines were really big and they were made out of copper. They were dead heavy. And yeah, there was quite a number of like heavy duty strings holding them up. When it came out with the colour processes, you couldn't see them. But when they redid the colour for the DVD release, you could. So what they've done on the 4K, and they've done a really good job, considering you're talking about a movie that's 70 odd years old now. What they did, they recolored it, and removed the strings, and it looks incredible. It really does. For such an old film, it looks incredible, and it's a great movie. It really is. I mean, I can imagine how the novel would have scared the crap out of Victorian England back in the day. I can imagine how that movie would have scared the hell out of people in the 1950s going to the cinema, because they use all the latest weapons and they don't do anything. The machines in that film, they have a protective shield. You know, at one point they drop a nuke on them. It doesn't do a slightest bit of thing. It doesn't even like slow them down or anything. It's remarkable, the special effects for the day as well. And then after that movie, I was actually going on holiday, and I saw the book available in W.H. Smith. Now, the cover of the book was the same cover as the Jeff Wayne album. It's the fighting machine destroying the Thunderchild with its heat ray. Thunderchild was a torpedo ram. It's a ship, a naval ship from that era, and that is a really cool part of the story, where it sort of sacrifices itself to enable civilians to escape on a steamer heading towards the continent, heading towards Belgium. I think it's Ostend, so it would have been Belgium. Not Calais, not France. And that probably dials into the politics of that time, where France would probably not be the place you'd want to go in the late 19th century. If you were British, you probably would have chosen Belgium, and Belgium would probably have accepted refugees. I'm not overly familiar with the politics in 1898 when the book was released, but it's kind of weird because, well, you think you'd go to the shortest point, but there's probably some political wrangle. Isn't it funny how things don't change? You've got refugees from a country under attack, desperately trying to leave. And quite possibly the fact that they chose Belgium was because France probably didn't want to take British refugees. I don't know whether that would have been the case back then, but it just seems weird to me that in the book they chose Ostend. Mind you, they weren't leaving from Dover. They were leaving from Southend on Sea. So actually, thinking about it, Belgium would probably be the nearest port. Just thinking about that. So maybe that was the reason why. I never actually, only just realised that actually they weren't departing from Dover or Plymouth or Portsmouth. It was Southend on Sea. They were going along from where the mouth of the River Thames would be. So yeah, that was probably why Belgium, because that would have been the nearest port they could have got into. I'm not sure about the state of relations between Britain and Holland, but it might have been that, I don't know. That's probably the reason why. In all these years, it never really occurred to me that they were leaving not via the south coast. They were leaving via Southend on Sea. There you go. New things happen every day. Fascinating. So anyway, how are we doing? Just looking at my battery. So yeah, reading the book was sort of my next encounter with it, and it was great. The book was scary, very well described, very well written. How it was broken into two parts, so you've got the bit where the Martians arrive and blow everybody up, and the second part is like their occupation, and it's all told from the perspective of a journalist, and then from the journalist's brother, who was in London at the time of the invasion. And it's wonderfully done, very vivid in its description, and very haunting, and very, very accurate. Now I want to just put a little caveat in here. There's so many people say that the story, the invasion, takes place in the 19th century. This is just a minor quibble, but it doesn't. It takes place in the early part of the 20th century. The story is actually written set in the future, but from a historically written account. So you're talking about a guy writing the story from an invasion that has happened, that he survived, set in the future. So his account he's writing the account from even further in the future, recounting events that happened in the past for a story that was set in the future just before he wrote it. There's one for you to get your head around on a dark and miserable Tuesday in November. But yeah, a lot of people think that it was set in Victorian England. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It's a really good story. There have been subsequent attempts at sequels. I think there's only one legitimate one, which was The Massacre of Mankind, which the Wells estate sanctioned. The rest have never been authorised. They're unauthorised sequels. The problem is it's gone into public domain now, which is why you get a lot of rubbish. The next thing I saw back in the 80s was a TV series. And that was set in the late 1980s. And it was alright. It was kind of your typical affair of fighting machines don't really appear much in it. And, you know, they kind of try to build on this story, and you've got aliens, and then you've got aliens above those aliens, and, you know, they can imitate how people look, they can turn into people. And that was entirely down to budgetary reasons, not story-based reasons, because from a story perspective that makes no sense at all. They based it on the scene in the 1950s movie where one of the aliens puts their hand on a woman's shoulder. And they said, oh, he was going to try and imitate her. No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. I mean, how could it have done that when there was another guy present that would have seen it? He would have seen her get imitated. So it was a ridiculous idea. But it was done entirely for budgetary reasons, because it was set in the modern day. It was set in the sort of the late 80s at the time it was being recorded. So you've just got people walking around with a bit of makeup on to make them look a bit sort of zombified, and that's what would happen apparently. Like, they would possess people, and then people would start to decay, so they'd need to keep possessing people. It was a bit of nonsense. It was all right, but I don't class it as part of the story, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't fit in with any of the story whatsoever. I watched a few of them, and he just started to get a bit more ridiculous, and then he got cancelled. Or it finished, I can't remember. I didn't watch all of it through to the end. But yeah. And then he sort of got to 2005 and there was an explosion. And this is because Spielberg was making his version, big budget version, and you get all of these, what they call mockbusters. They came along, most were absolutely terrible. Things happen in them that were just pretty hilarious. They're so low budget. Some were alright, but they were well, I say some. I think there was two. There was one by a company called Pendragon, and this thing was supposed to be book accurate. They were making a big play because the Spielberg one was set in what would have been starts out in contemporary New Jersey, modern day. So Pendragon were like, oh no, ours is going to be book accurate. I think they made this humongously long film that's most of the time it was people just walking. It was book accurate in the time period they were trying to portray, I suppose. And it was supposedly set in England, but it wasn't filmed in England because apparently England has a lot in common with the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. Not exactly a good substitute, geographically speaking. And the special effects were so hilariously bad, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was a PlayStation 1 game. We're not going that way because he's revving that bloody thing up. It was dreadful. It was absolutely dreadful. I saw parts of it, and to be honest with you, it was crap. It was absolutely crap. I couldn't watch it all. I just skipped through loads of sections, and it's not that book accurate really either, to be honest with you. There's like things that happen in it that literally do not occur in the book. Yeah, not great. And then there was one that come out that it was, I think it ended up being called H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. I don't know. Oh, that was the Pendragon one. And then there was one when it was released in the UK. This was the mockbuster version, the Asylum version. That wasn't great. It was better than the Pendragon version, but it still wasn't fantastic. That was set in sort of modern day United States. The special effects were horrific, as you would expect from a early 2000s Asylum movie. You know, it's that horrible, crappy CGI that is totally inferior to the CGI that they were using on television shows in the late 80s and early 90s. It's absolutely wretched production. Yeah, didn't like it at all, if I'm being honest. It's just cheap and nasty. And then, you know, bang up to date, you've got bang up to date, you then had the Spielberg version, which was really good in my view. It was a really good show. Version. Really good, really enjoyable. A couple of bits in it that kind of don't make sense. There's a scene where all electrical devices are supposed to be knocked out by lightning, and then a guy turns up, and when the aliens come out of the ground and they start attacking, a guy starts shooting with a camera, with like a camcorder device, which is electrical, but miraculously works. It's like you're literally just shown a scene where everything electrical has been knocked out, and then some guy's able to use a camera. It's a bit sloppy, really, but it's good. It's really good. I like it. I like it. You've got that. It's very intense. There's a good storyline, really, of a father trying to get his kids out of harm's way while the invasion's going on, which is a departure from the book, but it's pretty good. Some people don't like it, huh? Why? Is it because Tom Cruise is in it? I think he does a really good job in it. There's some very memorable scenes. And then to finish up the movies, there were others that came out, but I'm not going to talk about them. To finish up the movies, you've got fucking start again. And so yeah, there were some other movies that come out after that were pretty crap. But we'll finish up on the movie front with the absolute legendarily shite you can't even call it War of the Worlds. You can't even call it a film. It's like an experiment, and let's just see how bad we can make it. It's got Ice Cube in it. It's on Amazon Prime. It should be shown to people to punish them. It's absolutely horrific. It looks like it was shot on an iPhone over a weekend, and it's absolutely abysmal. I mean, it's so bad it's funny. The effects are pathetic, absolutely pathetic. The story is about as pathetic as the effects. These aliens invade to steal our data. Really? Really? Wonderful. Yeah. It's so I can't even describe how bad it is. I don't even want to revisit it in my mind. It's that bad. I watched it because everyone was saying how bad it was, and dear God, it was worse. I went in with minus expectations and was still blown away by how bad it was. This is the problem that it's gone into public domain. You're going to see all manner of utter crap put out there with that name on it. There's a lesson to be learned there with keeping stuff like that out of public domain. You really do. If you care about something, don't let it go in public domain, because you will just get all manner of crap from talentless people who think they're smart, but they're as dim as a broken light bulb. And that pretty much sums up that film. It was dreadful. And there's been, you know, books that have been thrown out there. Some are alright, some are completely dreadful. Some have been written as either a spin-off or a sequel to the original story. However, the people that have written the original story have clearly never read it or understood the original story. They've not read it thoroughly because they contradict things that happen in the story. There's a lot of contradictory things that occur. Timing of things that's totally, like in one of them, the Martians deploy black smoke quite late on in the book. It's after they've suffered a couple of setbacks. So they deploy a bioweapon so they can launch from miles away, in areas where they suspect there might be a build-up of any military, and that's because they've suffered losses. And in some of the books, they deploy it like at the beginning of the book, early on in the book. No, they don't. No, they don't. If you've read the original book, there's a very specific scene where the narrator, the journalist, the narrator, actually describes seeing this weapon deployed for the first time. Oh, I'm not going down that path, it's far too wet, muddy. But like this, in one of these books, it's deployed right at the beginning. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Literally, the reason that they use it is because the British Army has destroyed some of their machines and damaged one. That's the whole point of that part of the story. It's the whole point. It's to show that they up the ante just when you think that there might be hope to destroying their equipment, to destroying them. They deploy a brand new weapon of which there's no defense against. The only way you can avoid it is by running away or climbing up a high building. Well, if you're an artillery unit, you can't do that. So they've had it. In the book, it describes how the British Army was defending London and has deployed all of these artillery units to stop the Martian advance. And there's this general comfort. Sort of like you describe, people in London at this point aren't evacuating. They just think, well, we've got all of these guns. We've already blown one up at this point in the story. And then they've damaged another. They've halted the advance already. So in that part of the book, there's the expectancy, there's a comfort, there's a safety. And the Martians come out with this weapon. They just fire these canisters. It describes how they line up in a crescent, quite a few miles apart. And each one of the machines just fires this projectile. And when the journalist looks off into the distance, you can see what he thinks at first is a hill growing, but it's not, it's the black smoke. And then there's the description of what it does to people and how it completely annihilated the army without a shot being fired. If you put that at the beginning of the book, you lose that impact in the book. So that should never have been in at that part. It's just an example of not understanding the source material. It's a writer putting something specifically in at a time for maximum impact. So you have to, this is what happens. Public domain is bad, people. It's bad. As I say, there's only one actually official sequel, which is called The Massacre of Mankind, that was written by a proper sci-fi author, and it's pretty good. I'll have to do quite a bit of editing, I think, with this video today, but that's okay. So I think getting into the sort of late stages of this now, this Walkie Talkie, which we've done something different. We're talking about books and movies and musical albums, all related to the War of the Worlds. But to finish, we'll talk about the video games, because I've only touched briefly on them. And we are a video game channel after all. So, video game versions have been quite a mixed bag. The best ones were actually inspired and based on the Jeff Wayne album. Well, they use the music and they use the graphical art style from that album. One of them that came out on the PlayStation was a third-person shooter where you're controlling various parts, various pieces of military artillery against them. There's a bit of license taken. There's new fighting machines. In the book there's only two that's described, which is the fighting machine and one they call a handling machine, which is basically like a construction machine. In the video game adaptation on the PlayStation, they're using new machines with, bigger and better equipment that they can array against you. And that also translates over into the PlayStation game. And the PC game. In the PC game, it's the PC game, it's like a real-time strategy. And that was pretty good as well. It was very hard. Brutally hard at times, but it was still good. Then there was, there's been others, but I'm just really going through the ones that I've played. There was then one which came out on the Xbox Live Arcade, which was it was like a platform survival. That was pretty good. It was all right. Patrick Stewart did the voiceover in that game. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was brutally hard as well, sometimes unfairly so. But that was like a platform game. And then they released this game called Dark Skies. And it was dreadful. It was just nothing. Don't even waste your time with it. It's like a third-person survival game. And in that, there is you've got these, again, people getting possessed. It's dreadful. Really is bad. It's sort of like a Last of Us type game, except you don't really, you don't choose to harm yourself. You just choose to, you have things that you can stun people with or whatever, but it's garbage. Like, the Martians make a very brief appearance in the game. It's really annoying. Really annoying. and it's just terrible. It's cheap. I think if you did a sequel to it, Darker Skies, it's like, really? Was just not one crap attempt bad enough that you had to do a sequel? But I tried it on the Switch, and I just spent most of my time laughing. I thought it was bad. So I think there's a real marketplace there for a proper survival horror game, not just some sort of indie knockoff attempt. You know, somebody wants to actually do it, it would be a fantastic survival horror game. There's no two ways about it. It would be, it'd be great. It'd be really good. Got good source material, lots of things you can do. I mean, you're not, you know, if you're just a normal person having to survive, you're not blowing these things up. So there is one that I've been keeping my eye on that's been in development for ages, but it's an indie game. I think it's like 1 or 2 people working on it, and it's not going to work, to be honest, because they're using assets from the Spielberg movie. It's going to get shut down the minute that thing gets released, and they want to charge money for it. They're going to get hit. So, like I say, you need a proper full-on version doing by a studio that's got the license. Anyway, this is a long one today, and I'm about done now. So, yeah. Anyway, catch you all later.